All right. Next, I would like to introduce somebody I've known probably for my last 20 years of my career. And actually, back in 1997, I came out to Nevada, and Mark Ratner was here, and he introduced me to Dr. Margaret Goodman, who at that point was working for the commission. And actually, she's got some very interesting ideas and some great safety protocols. Come on up, please, Doc. 20 years. I was 27.
I was only 10. What can I say? You know, I don't want to, while we're getting this going, I just wanted to backtrack for one thing, and I loved the presentation on the inspectors, and I was mentioning to Mr. Bennett over there, I hope you can hear me because sometimes I turn away from the mic and you can't, but I was mentioning, as far as the inspectors are concerned, we even, many, many years ago, this was up in northern Nevada, and there was like an afternoon top-rank fight at the pepper mill, and I can't even remember who the doctor was, but the inspector ran to the doctor and said, "Doc, you got to come back and look at this guy." This was before the card even was going to start. And the fighter had a blown pupil, had a very dilated pupil. And he brought the doctor back, and the doctor goes, "I didn't see that." And then he started to ask the fighter a couple of questions. Turned out the fighter was bleeding in his brain, not from boxing. He had a malformation. It's called an AVM, an arteriovascular malformation in the back of his brain. Thank goodness the paramedics were around. They transported the guy, did fine, of course, never fought again. But so even before the card starts, you got to have that evacuation plan. Anyway, this is me. How many of you were here last year, just so I can make sure and I'm not too redundant? And I apologize, I don't want to redo everything. But I started the Voluntary Anti-Doping Association in 2011. And the reason why I did this, I was a former ring physician. This is kind of my background. I was honored enough to work as a ring physician with the Nevada Commission for so long. I was actually honored to even be part of the Association of Boxing Commissions Medical Advisory Board for some time. And thank you to Mike for inviting me here again. I really appreciate it. And I can just see, just like Mauricio was saying, there's so much as far as uniformity that can really fix most of our problems. So what VADA really was created to do was to really shine a light on the problem of doping. I mean, I'm going to try and watch some of the Olympics this week, which starts on the 5th, but every article you see has to do with doping, and I think it's terribly sad. It makes me sad because it makes you question, are these results really real? And then when you compound that with what we do in boxing and MMA, we're dealing with a whole other bag of injuries and issues. And there was this really good article yesterday that you should read from, I don't know, it's called Vice. It was a site. It was a very in-depth article on why we should not prohibit performance-enhancing drugs. And I read that and I started to question myself, but then I said, wait a minute, you can maybe make an argument for that in swimming, but there's no way you can make an argument for that in what we all do. And for those of you that don't do a lot of testing, and it should not be about testing itself, but for those of you that don't, there's a couple of problems. And one of the problems is we have to expedite the results. There's no point in finding out way later that a guy tested positive weeks before the fight started and nobody knew about it. The other thing is, and I think Pat is going to talk about this, is release of results. There has to be some sharing. You're all in this for the right reason. You want to know if somebody had a brain bleed, but you also want to know if they tested positive in your commission 2 months ago for a performance-enhancing drug. So this talks a little bit about what we do, what we're trying to do, and what we really want to do is help you advance your programs. I don't need to be involved in your program. I don't care if I'm involved in your program, but I want to help. And we really want to do this to really stop this problem. And all you have to do, I mean, I don't know, I'm sure you all look on the internet every day. I look on the internet, and almost every other article I read on MMA is about some guy or woman testing positive for some PED. And if you think it doesn't happen in boxing, we're all being naive. So basically, we're a nonprofit. Dr. Angela Silva is here. She's our secretary, works with me, and is helping us. We're creating an electronic medical record system to house all of the WBC fighters that I'm going to talk about. But none of us are paid. Okay, I know that's hard to believe, but none of us are paid, and we participate in this because we care about this sport. We want to make it better. These are some of the names, and I know these are all the big names, but these are some of the names of the fighters that we've tested. A couple of fighters that we're currently testing, Golovkin and Kovalov and Ward and Kell Brook. We've tested many others. We've even had fighters that have come to us 6 or 7 times to enter our program. Some of the countries that we've tested in, I was really amazed. I don't think this is talking out of school, but we just started testing Kell Brook for the Golovkin fight. And lo and behold, we get their whereabouts forms, and that's the forms that they fill out to tell us where they're going to be 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, while they're in our program. They tell me, they put on the form, they've got his address, and he's in Sheffield. And I go, okay, that's not going to be too hard. It's not going to be too expensive to send somebody to Sheffield. Well, lo and behold, I look at the little thing on the bottom, and he was vacationing in the Canary Islands. So I had to send somebody all the way there. So it is interesting, but we can go anywhere. We've done over 200 blood and urine collections just since January. And some of the commissions that we've worked with, I've been very proud. Mike Mazzulli has been very, very helpful. Mr. Bennett's been very helpful. Andy Foster has been great. We often get phone calls from other commissions to help you with your drug testing. I know this sounds, I'm not trying to get political, I promise. But what would be the same thing about doping in combat sports and ISIS? Bottom line is we need to name what the problem is, and we need to deal with it. And I often hear fighters going, oh, I never tested positive for any. Well, they weren't tested. And if they were tested, what were they tested for? They were tested for stimulants or they were tested for narcotics, but they weren't tested for PEDs. So we need to deal with this problem. You need to deal with this problem. I'm happy to help you do that, but just sitting back every year, I mean, I can't tell you how many times I've been here talking about the same thing, and I hope I'm not boring anybody, but we really need to do something about this. So what is it that we need to do? You've heard this over and over again today, but there has to be some uniformity. You have unified rules for how you handle a boxing match or an MMA match. You need to have unified ways of handling doping problems and an anti-doping program. It is not that difficult to do. It's just getting it done. I get so tired of hearing it's not in my regs. I get that. There's so many things that Mr. Bennett has done to change his regs, things that Andy has done to change his regs. They can help you do it. But just saying it's not in my regs is not a good excuse anymore. It makes people question the results of the fights. It makes the wonderful fighters that have trained so long, people question, were they doping or not? We use only WADA-accredited labs. You need to have the same prohibited substance list. You need to test for the same kinds of substances. And you need to develop, like Nevada recently developed, regular penalties and suspensions for depending on when someone tests, what they test positive for. There's no reason not to have that as something that you all work on in your committees to have uniformly. What we do is year-round testing. We're going to be starting that with the WBC. We also do testing leading up to a fight. So to me, this has really, and I try to think of things when I'm sitting around. I'm not really that good with PowerPoint, but I try to think, we really are at a fork in the road. To say that nobody questions the results of these fights that you all have is really silly. And it's not fair to the fighters that are clean. And if you really want to make things better, we need to deal with it. So this is pretty much our philosophy. I do believe we can all work together. You can work together. I'm happy to just advise on how to really create some uniformity in an anti-doping program. Both Nevada and California have been very, very strong in doing so. I have talked about this before. I still in my heart of hearts wish there was some kind of a federal commission or a national commission, but we don't have it. But because we don't have it, that puts more pressure on all of you, but I do believe that you can do it. You can put this together. And if you don't, we are becoming part of the problem. You really do. You become part of the problem if you haven't made these changes. And then the fights themselves are unfair, and they're actually unsafe. You know, I've tried a couple of times to Dr. Ann McKee. Dr. McKee is one of the major pathology researchers on chronic traumatic encephalopathy, and they're just starting to put together the athletes that they're testing on their brains, what kind of use they had of performance-enhancing drugs. And they're starting to find out. As a matter of fact, I was talking to Dr. Bernick the other day, running the great program at the Lou Ruvo Center on concussion and doing all the MRIs, and they're finding in a lot of the questionnaires of the fighters they're talking to, a lot of them, and I'm not just talking MMA, have been using performance-enhancing drugs. So I'm going to talk about one little case here, and I'm going to ask Andy Foster to help me a little bit because this happened in the state of California. So I wanted to kind of give you a little example. So just so you know, what we did was we were asked by the promoter to test Mr. Vargas, and I'm not telling tales out of school or violating HIPAA or whatever you want to call it, because this has been written up and everywhere for many months. But a WBC champion, Francisco Vargas, was supposed to fight Orlando Salida, and these are the details. Both entered our program on April 6th, okay? Francisco Vargas was a little bit complicated as he was training in California and also training in Mexico. So his first test was on April 16th in Alta Loma, California, okay? And his second test was on April 21st. Lo and behold, I'm sitting at home, and all of a sudden I get this across my computer that we had a positive test. And we had a positive test in Mr. Vargas for the drug clenbuterol. And I'll talk a little bit about clenbuterol. Clenbuterol is a substance that's banned at all times. So first thing, what did I do? You know, because these are things you guys have to deal with as executive directors and commissioners all the time. First thing I did in a panic, called Mr. Foster on the phone and explained what we had. And then, as you'd like to say, and this is the thing I was saying, you got to release the results, but bottom line is that's not my job. My job is just to make sure that the testing is done perfectly, that we maintain the chain of custody, that the sample arrived at the WADA-accredited lab intact and perfect, and then I hand it over to the commission. The commissions should be the sole adjudicator when we are asked to test for the promoter in this instance. So I called Mr. Foster, and you can tell us a little bit what happened after that. Here I am dumping this on you again, huh? Oh yeah, because this is good for you all, because I know you've all been faced with positive drug screens, but this was an out of competition drug screen, so that's the importance in this one.
So before you guys jump to conclusions, I think it's important that you understand what clenbuterol is and what the half-life of clenbuterol is.
Oh, I'm going to get to that. You want me to? I can.
Yeah. If you'll talk about the half-life of clenbuterol, because I think that's a key point to this entire equation.
Well, first of all, what clenbuterol is, and I'm trying to remember the exact half-life. I think it depends.
24 to 36 hours.
It can be, but and I was talking to Dr. Catlin, who's our scientific advisor, and sometimes he thought it could be a little bit longer than, but it varies. But you're given a good point. But clenbuterol, like I said, is prohibited at all times. Why is it prohibited? Well, it's not prohibited because someone can use it for their asthma. It's prohibited because it has other things that it does, that it increases performance. It's used as an inhalant legally, or what you can get prescribed for your physician for asthma, but it also releases insulin. And why would an athlete use it? An athlete would use it because it can be thermogenic, and that means it can help your weight loss, help you make weight, and it increases your aerobic capacity. And clenbuterol was used for years. We actually had a fighter in Russia, which is another story, that tested positive for that, because it's used in cattle. And the reason why it's often used in cattle is to give you leaner meat. When you go buy, I'm a vegetarian, but when you go buy meat, you don't want fatty meat. So that's how it was used. It's pretty much no longer legal. It's no longer legal in Mexico, but a lot of the cattle producers still use that drug. But bodybuilders use it for cutting cycle. So, and these are just some of the athletes that have tested positive, and Lucas Brown was our test. Go ahead.
So,
and I'll go back.
Dr. Goodman calls me, and one thing I've learned, and I hope all you get from this experience, is when you get this call, don't panic. Okay? You need to think this through a little bit. So I called my chairman, and I spoke with him. I called my attorneys. I spoke with them. And I looked at the calendar. And then I started researching clenbuterol. I didn't know a thing about clenbuterol before that day. So I started learning about clenbuterol and what it's about, what it does, why would you would use it. Certainly different with the half-life than testosterone, which is that's a full-blown PED. I think we can all agree that's something people can get some good benefit off of that.
Many in this room.
So what I did was, after I researched it, after I looked at it, I called Dr. Goodman back. I called my attorneys. I called Orlando Salito's camp. I called Golden Boy. And we got everybody on the phone. And I asked the first question. Mr. Salito, I think it's a valid question to ask. Do you want to fight? That's a valid question. The guy's just tested with 1.2 nanograms of clenbuterol. Small amount. It's positive. It's illegal in any forms at any time. Oh, I didn't mention this. This is the bigger part of the thing. The Olympics just released, the day I'm looking at this, they just released an advisory on clenbuterol.
And the NFL. And the NFL
and the NFL and USA Today. And they saw all these story skirts coming out. All these Mexican athletes are testing positive for clenbuterol because they're eating the beef. And they're talking about, hey, you shouldn't eat it, you shouldn't eat it, you shouldn't eat it. So I had that. And, got to remember, Mr. Vargas tested clean 5 days before this in California. So I've got a clean test. I've got a positive test with 1.2. And then I've got all these stories about how you shouldn't go to Mexico and eat the beef. And I've got, 45 days or 40 days, somewhere in there, 40 days before the fight or something. So anyway, we got everybody together. Salito wants to fight. Vargas wants to fight. Everybody wants to fight. My attorneys are good with it. Dr. Goodman, we talk with her, and, we set up a testing regimen for Mr. Vargas. And we tell Mr. Vargas, any of these things, you come back with anything, we're gonna kill this fight. And it was a real risk for HBO and for Golden Boy, because if this was really a dirty fighter, he was gonna, we're gonna be able to get him. He becomes, I know those are like dates up there, but I want you to think about the level of testing this poor guy went through. And he's not a poor guy, he shouldn't, whatever, but he was absolutely tested with every panel that Dr. Goodman can think of. I don't know what this poor guy spent on drug testing, but I was getting receipts back. It was all this stuff, and I'd ask her, and she'd say it was good, it was good, it was good. I think with the circumstances that surrounded this test, we've killed lots and lots of fights. I think this is the only time I've really moved forward with something. But I had all this information, and this drug's, you Google it. It's in Mexico. It's in Latin America. They
Russia.
had a whole, Russia. They had a whole, the guy in Russia is a heavyweight.
Yeah.
It's a weight cutting drug, really. And what was it? The whole soccer team got banned.
Yeah,
one
in
year.
Mexico.
The whole soccer team got put out because of this thing, because they ate the beef. So, you have to use your head about these things and understand what each drug does and what it's for, and talk to experts like Dr. Goodman. But this got passed. How many is that? 1, 2,
We had
3.
a total of 9 tests.
Yeah, I had a total of 9 tests.
And that's atypical. We wouldn't typically do that.
No, we made his life hard.
Yeah.
We made his life hard.
Yeah.
He was living with us at that time.
Yeah.
You know, and but I thought I thought this was surrounding the circumstances. In my view, I was the right outcome. I thought the right thing came. It's the Fight of the Year candidate, and you know, and by the way, he passed his in competition test as well.
That's true. Thank you. So just one example. Is Mr. McCormick here? Jody? No, not here. From Alabama? No? I was just, anyway, I just was going to give you another example. Hey. Hi. How are you? I just was going to give an example just so you could tell how we worked with you with the out-of-competition testing. Mr. Wilder was supposed to fight Alexander Povetkin in Russia, WBC fight, and that was supposed to be on May, I can't remember the date in May, but Mr. Povetkin tested positive for a substance called meldonium. I'm not going to bore you with all of that, but the bottom line is poor Mr. Wilder needed a fight, and so this was the fight that was supposed to take place, and so they wanted us to demonstrate that Mr. Wilder was a clean fighter and that his opponent was clean, because I think his opponent had a problem before with positive drug tests. So what I did was I called up, just so you can see how we work, I called up Jody and explained what we're going to do. Typically what we do is we want everything transparent and open. I send an announcement to the promoter, to the fighters, to their representatives, Fight Facts hears from us, and we tell them that we're going to be testing this fighter. And then maybe you can just indicate real quickly what happened after that, how you handled that so other commissions can learn.
So with us being a smaller commission, we don't necessarily have the financial means to do the testing like Brother Andy does. But Andy has been very, very generous and sent us any test that we've ever asked for and allowed us to use their number with UCLA and make sure that we could do the USADA clean boxing anti-doping programs. But with this one, we knew that there were issues with Mr. Areola. He had previously tested positive, I believe, in California. Well, we know California, and in Texas.
Texas, yeah.
Yeah. He was suspended in Texas prior to this fight, so we knew that we had to do some sort of testing, and we were about to do the testing. It was just one of those things where Deontay, after having a very, very horrible experience with Povetkin in advance of his fight over there, decided, hey, I really like what VADA's doing. I want to continue working with VADA, and brought them on board for that fight. Dr. Goodman and I immediately spoke. I wanted to make sure that what they were testing for is what we wanted them to test for, and that they would share all their results with us, and that we had an agreement that their results were going to be our results so long as they continued testing for what we wanted. It saved us a little bit of a headache and a little bit of money in doing so. And we were still able to have that USADA testing, the full labs
WADA.
through VADA.
Well, it's World Anti-Doping Agency panel,
Right.
plus all the wonderful things that we do.
Right. So we had all of that, and we came to an agreement, and they said, okay, we'll share everything with you, and we'll share everything with the WBC. And we all worked perfectly together to make sure that it was a clean, fair, and competitive fight through the drug testing. And they used, I believe, urine and blood in their testing, whereas we would have only done urine. So it went above and beyond the standards that we actually were looking for. And I actually got an email from Dr. Goodman last night saying that both Wilder and Areola in their post-fight were negative. So very excited about that.
All right, thank you. So Mauricio Suleiman alluded to this. So this is something that Mauricio has set up. You know, when we talk about uniformity, and I tried to think about uniformity, how it could work with all the different commissions, no oversight body that, you know, ABC obviously, but no national commission. And so Mauricio and I worked together, and it was mainly the idea of his dad, actually, your dad, so many years ago, to make sure that as best we can, doping is going to go on. I mean, there's nothing you can do 100%, but to try to create uniformity so that all of their top 15 fighters in each weight class would be tested in this program. It's called the Clean Boxing Program. I'm going to show you in just a minute a little bit of this webinar. The WBC had set up policies for this specific program, and I really encourage you to look at this. I really encourage you to look at the entire webinar because it takes about 30 minutes to go through. It'll teach you a lot. Me going through it and helping to put it together with Luis Escalona from the WBC, who's the administrator for them. It's just a great program, and we will be administering it for them, and the results will go to all of these individuals, and the WBC, just like they're doing with Mr. Povetkin, is working on resolution. So what I'm going to do is show you this little webinar. Hopefully the sound will work too. And one thing that we wanted to do, the main thing is you can't expect these kids, I say kids, some of them are a little bit older than that, but you can't expect them to know all this stuff. I don't know all this stuff. And so mostly what we want to do is educate them. Educate them on performance-enhancing drugs. This should not be just about punishment and policing the sport. We don't want to do that. I know you don't want to do that. But we want things fair. So what we require them to sign off that they have watched this webinar. And I'll just show you a little bit about it, and if you can, see if you can get it to play.
Thank you for taking the time to learn about the Clean Boxing Program, or CBP, made possible through partnership between the World Boxing Council, or WBC, and the Voluntary Anti-Doping Association, or VADA. First proposed by the late WBC president, Jose Suleiman, the Clean Boxing Program protects boxers and the great sport of boxing from the dangers of doping and supplements. The program does this by offering education, resources, and out-of-competition random testing. When you, as a boxer, enter this program, you send a clear message about the health of our sport and its future. Marcel doesn't realize how risky taking supplements can be. He thinks supplements are just like vitamins, a good way to eat a healthy diet. Supplements include things like vitamins, minerals, herbs, and amino acids. Marcel has always figured they would be fine. Let's help him out. Take a look at these statements about supplements. Which of them are true? Select all that apply, then click Submit.
And then they read this to them. And by the way, this also is in Spanish.
But he doesn't always know what that means. To learn why each substance is prohibited, drag it to the trash can where it belongs. One of the most well-known prohibited substances, anabolic steroids like testosterone, as well as other anabolic agents, are strictly prohibited. It can cause you long-term irreversible damage as a fighter. Adderall and other stimulants are prohibited, and they have no place in the body of a committed clean boxer. Human growth hormone, along with peptides, insulin, and other hormones, is not only prohibited, but also very dangerous. Good news is there are resources available to help you. Click each bottle to learn about how to evaluate taking supplements. We have teamed up with the Drug-Free Sports Resource Exchange Center. Be certain you know the benefits of a supplement. If the benefit is minimal, it's not worth the risk, and the decision is now easy. Find out if you can make changes to your diet instead of taking the supplement. There might be an easy substitution. Remember what you're risking. Ask yourself what you stand to lose if this supplement led to a positive test result.
Well, I think, number one, when I first got involved in doping...
Are you able to pause that for one quick sec? I don't know if you are.
I didn't really.
You know, one thing I wanted to tell you, this gentleman, this is Tyler Hamilton. I don't know if the people from USADA are here or Jeff Nowitzki is here. He knows Jeff Nowitzki too well, probably. But he's an 8-time Tour de France competitor. He was not necessarily volunteered to try to do it, but he was the one that outed Lance Armstrong. And what we did with the WBC program, I wanted a fighter to come forward and do a testimonial for this. And we're just showing you little tidbits of this, and I really do hope you watch it because you really will learn a lot and you'll appreciate more of not just what VADA does, but what a thorough anti-doping program needs to do and what we need to tell the fighters. But at any rate, I called him on the phone and he just said, tell me where to come. He didn't charge anything. And he wanted to just talk to fighters about what they needed to know and what happened to his life when he used performance-enhancing drugs. Okay, go ahead. This is just a little bit of him.
I wish I had taken a couple steps back, taken a few deep breaths, and at least thought it through. I really didn't do that. I felt pressure from the team to do that, and I didn't really listen to my gut. And my gut knew the difference between right and wrong. Yes, a massive, massive mistake. I can look back now and say, oh, I was young. I wasn't experienced, but I knew the truth. Typically we all know the truth. Our God will tell us that.
Anyway, so like I said, I really hope that you watch this and see how much benefit it is. Bottom line is you all are resources to one another. You all are mentors to one another. That's all I want to continue to be. I love the sport. I love combat sports and boxing. And there's so much that we can do, but we need to do this now. The time is now. And, you can say that, you hear that from people, but really, I mean, if you just look at what's happening with the Olympics, you can see that we need to do something. And this will really help make our fights fair and safe. And if I can be of any resource to any of you at any time, do not hesitate to contact me. Thank you so much for your time, and I'm sorry if I ran a little over.